City has just elected its 7th-term Legislative Council. Results for all 90 seats have been released after over 1.3 million voters cast their ballots on Sunday. It's the region's first legislative election after changes to the electoral system earlier this year under the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong. For more on that, let's cross live to our reporter Zhou Jiaxing in Hong Kong. Jiaxing, you've been following this election all the way. Tell us how are local residents reacting to the results?
Yes, Pandang, as you mentioned, we know this is Hong Kong's first legislative election after the Chinese central government ordered the reforms in an effort to ensure the governance by patriots, suggesting those so-called oppositions formerly involved in anti-China activities are not eligible to compete in the election. It doesn't necessarily mean that all the opposition members are completely excluded. Actually, there were several representatives, and Mr. T. Chu-yo on social welfare issues is again returned to the legislature. Now, the Chief Executive of Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, Carrie Lam, said on Monday that she is quite looking forward to working with the new members, hailing what she called broad representation of the newly elected 90 legislators. But we know that there's more work to do for the government, aside from the enactment of laws, including improving its public relations, expanding knowledge about the change in its policies, and then keeping those promises. And the social unrests back in 2019 and in some early years are definitely lessons. So some locals I spoke with said they are still in lack of confidence about the governance, and some were tentative about the new electoral system. And let's hear what some had to say.
There are no voices from the opposition side. If there are even just some opposing opinions, they will send signals to the local government and the central government to indicate what Hong Kong people are thinking. But now, there will not be many of these signals.
The election has not changed much. I only voted for the candidates that I know of. The election is more or less the same to me. I've been living here in Hong Kong for several decades.
So soon after the election, countries from the Five Eyes, which is an intelligence alliance, including the US, UK, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, expressed grave concerns over the change in the electoral system, saying it has reversed what they consider the contested elections in the past by eliminating oppositions. Meanwhile, Beijing issued a white paper Monday saying that there was no democracy in Hong Kong under the British rule. It said facts have proven time and again the anti-China agitators in Hong Kong and the external groups behind them must be held to account for impeding Hong Kong's progress toward democracy. And the new legislative body will be operating on January 1st, and its first session is scheduled to begin on January 12th.
Thank you very much, our reporter Zhou Jiaxing in Hong Kong. In response to questions on a low voter turnout in this election in Hong Kong, Hong Kong's Chief Executive Carrie Lam said the number of voters is also a very important factor.
The turnout rate this time, 30.2%, is lower than the past if we look purely at turnout rates. But 1.35 million voters came out and cast their ballots, so we can't say that it's not an important election or not an election with support from a great number of voters.
For more insights into the legislative election in Hong Kong, let's cross live to Dr. Eugene K.K. Chan, President of the Association of Hong Kong Professionals. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Chan. I believe you just heard words from Chief Executive Carrie Lam on the relatively low voter turnout this time. What's your take on this? Are local residents really having doubts about this improved electoral system?
I mean, it's a very good question you have just posed. Certainly, the Hong Kong community is still very open to discussion. People talk about the possibility of a higher or implication of a higher or lower turnout rate. But at the end, I think it proved to be 30.2%. To me, as a professional, I'm very happy about it because, as Mrs. Lam has said, 1.35 million people is definitely quite a high number of people. And if you look at the atmosphere in the community, people do talk about who should we vote. So I think although it's a new system, people are getting used to it, and I think is doing well. On the other hand, there are people who may not like it because it's change of system. I think it takes time because at the end of the day, I think the most important is whether the new Legislative Council is going to help Hong Kong to steer us in the right direction. As Mrs. Rita Fan said yesterday, is the taste of the pudding more important than the icing, which is even a higher turnout rate.
Dr. Chan, I believe you've been following this very closely. I believe you're quite familiar with criticism, especially those criticism from the West, talking about a lack of representation of opposition voices in this latest legislative election. What do you make of this?
Firstly, when you use the word opposition, does it mean that anybody or everybody who's going to oppose to the government, no matter what they do? If my understanding of the word opposition is to give different ideas that we are not going to say yes because it's coming from the government, I think we have no lack of opposition. Because if you look at from 70 to increase to 70 to 90 legislators, and if you look at the composition, which I've just studied earlier today, we have nearly 2/3 are brand new legislators, which are of different sectors, comprising from the professional sector, the daily worker sector, and also you realize that the age is much younger. So with a more number of people, younger age group, and with new legislators, I'm sure everyone will have different ideas. If you look at the Provisional Legislative Council back in 1997, there was definitely no unanimous voice amongst the legislators. So to that issue, I think I can assure the Western countries or the government, I have no concern about we have a lack of opposition voices if we are going to move Hong Kong forward in the right direction.
So, Dr. Chen, since you've taken a closer look at the composition of all 90 members of the 7th LegCo, so tell us, what do you think would be their priority in the imminent future? Do you think this term will be more efficient than previous ones?
Certainly, we hope so. That's why that's the reason why I went out to vote. Is I'm looking forward to a more efficient system. If you look at Hong Kong in the last few years, it's definitely very saddened to see that our Legislative Council was being demolished, attacked, and people aren't doing the right thing. I mean, people aren't there for the meetings, and they're filibustering, they're calling up the quorum all the time. So with this new 90 people, which I know many of them, all of them have come out because this time they have no worry that they will be penalized, there will be no one attacking them. Everything is going to go into the right track. So I'm sure they will agree with me. The first thing we have to look at is socio-economic factors, such as a housing shortage problem. And also we talk about the lack of outward mobility movement for the younger generation, and whether our young generation will be able to give themselves a good chance to play a good role in the Greater Bay Area, which Hong Kong is part of. So I think that if you ask me the question, as at this moment, I'm very confident and optimistic.
Well, Dr. Chen, we'll be getting back to you on this very soon. Staying with the topic, China says anti-China agitators undermine and disrupt democracy in Hong Kong. That's from a white paper on Hong Kong's democracy under the One Country, Two Systems framework issued on Monday.
The white paper says the agitators openly challenge the order established by the Constitution and the Basic Law, and they call for referendums to separate Hong Kong from China in collusion with external anti-China forces. The paper says agitators have instigated, abetted, organized, and engaged in illegal activities in the city, and have justified and incited violence as a means to solve political issues, asserting that a criminal record adds color to life. The document also says agitators have incited hatred among local people. It says they have obstructed government administration and employed various means to paralyze the Legislative Council and district councils. The white paper says agitators have misled public opinion by portraying Hong Kong as a sovereign country, and they judge democracy as true or fake only by their own criteria, that is, whether it can help them come to power. During district council elections in November 2019, violence, coercion, and threats were used to intimidate voters and candidates. The white paper says agitators have constantly obstructed the gradual and orderly development of democracy in Hong Kong. Wang Haiyang, CGTN.
The white paper also says the 2019 turmoil in Hong Kong was a painful blow to national security, the rule of law, and social and economic stability in Hong Kong. In 2019, violent protests rocked the city for months over a proposed extradition bill. Here's a look back on those events.
The social unrest in Hong Kong started with a murder. A Hong Kong native, Chan Tong Kai, strangled his girlfriend to death in Taiwan, stuffed her body in a suitcase, and dumped it near a subway station. Since there is no extradition treaty between the two regions, the suspect could not be forced to return to Taiwan and stand trial. So the Hong Kong government then proposed a fugitive bill that included Taiwan and the Chinese mainland. This was what lit the fuse. The narrative quickly turned into an accusation that China was attempting to crush freedoms in Hong Kong and sabotage the one country, two systems principle. From June 9th, protesters took to the streets, calling for the complete withdrawal of the fugitive bill. Events escalated on July 1st, when rioters broke into the Legislative Council building and vandalized the complex. They also defaced the national emblem at Beijing's liaison office in Hong Kong on July 21st. A month later, Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam said the bill was dead. But protests continued. Large crowds paralyzed the international airport in mid-August and caused the cancellation of hundreds of flights. Lam announced the complete withdrawal of the fugitive bill on September 4th.
特區政府會正式撤回條例草案，完全釋除市民嘅疑慮。
Yet violence and vandalism worsened.
Some experts say the timing of the white paper is very significant.
Since 2019, there were such challenges and problems, not only in terms of the violence in the street, but actually the most serious challenge to the one country, two systems ever since Hong Kong's back to China. And in 2020, the People's Congress has passed the National Security Law of Hong Kong. The publication of this white paper is important indeed to show how and when and why democracy in Hong Kong has been in practice since its return to China.
I think the highlight is the direction of Hong Kong's democratic development in the future. The white paper, as always, emphasizes the practice of one country, two systems in Hong Kong has achieved great success. Under this mechanism, Hong Kong can progressively explore democratic development with Hong Kong characteristics under the leadership of the central government and build high-quality democracy, just as the current election committee has optimized its structure and expanded its scale, its classes in various sectors, and all aspects can be fully represented.
For more insights, let's get back to Dr. Chan. So, Doctor, looking back at the unrest in 2019 in Hong Kong, would you say things are different now?
Gee, what a relief. I mean, looking at those images does cause everyone headaches. I must say, during my interview work with other guests I had interviewed, I can namely tell you the Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, the Indian Association, and many other foreign groups in Hong Kong thank our mainland government to having this national security law, because it does bring back peace and stability. So because everyone living here, they can't work, they can't have a daily life, they worry that they get penalized. So life is so much better. And if you look at the recent election, why am I saying that? Why I said earlier that I'm very happy to come out to vote, because you feel safe, because you don't have all those bad newspapers or media going to poison our university students or even put on big advertisement on newspapers. You see, everyone is back to a normal place whereby we can get back to our own life. And I can use the word, basically, the national security law has helped us to clean the slate, or a broom to sweep the floor clean for Hong Kong to start again. So we just certainly look forward to much better things to come with the new Legislative Council. And with the white paper has said rightly that I think we had our means of democracy. I mean, we had some challenges. So hopefully with the new electoral council, with the improved electoral system, and nextly with a new chief executive, hopefully Hong Kong will be on to the path again. So I'm very confident.
So, Dr. Chen, tell us a little bit more about those challenges you just mentioned. According to some Western politicians and criticisms, they're saying that the very principle of patriots administering Hong Kong is a challenge to Hong Kong's democracy. Do you agree?
Totally disagree. I mean, I have studied overseas and look at all the people who work in the government. Of course, they should pay allegiance to the country, which is a natural thing to do. I'm sure if you could ask any of the Western media or even power, are you going to invite traitors who are going to run your government? Totally nonsense. I think this is a way of stigmatizing or smearing the word patriot. I think patriot meaning somebody who loves the country, and whoever loves the country will do the best for them. And in Hong Kong democracy, all these years, people will find consensus, even if they don't have different opinions. As I said earlier, we have enough opposing voices to government policies, but the objective is to make things better for Hong Kong. So I totally disagree with the Western accusation. Totally smearing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eugene K.K. Chan, President of the Association of Hong Kong Professionals.